kanye no-Archdeacon Mhlongo, usokhaya walapha, imeya uMshengu, imeya yesifunda, umfundisi umhlonishwa uNgubane, abantwana baseNdlunkulu besilo neNdlunkulu ehamba nabantwana benkosi, umhlonishwa uSomlomo okade ekhuluma lapha phambi kwethu, ndaba omkhulu, ngiyalibonga ithuba onginika lona loba ngishanele uma ongangezwe sezokhuluma. Inkosi yamadunge engusihlalo wethu sonke, umhlonishwa umholi wenkatha enkululeko yesizwe Ngotsha, siyathokoza lapha njengoba ngiyangisho ukuthi bonke abazelwa inkosi uMpande, ngisho nokuzonda kangakanani unegazi unalo igazi lokwahlabisa, ngoba unina wenkosi uMpande ukaNgotsha, intombi yakini ekhaya ebaleni. Siyathokoza uma ukhona. Bonke abahlonishwa abakhona, zonke ihambele ikhona. Major Nathan Chronic of the Royal Welsh Regiment, members of the Zulu royal family, the chairperson of the House of Tradition Leaders, Amakos present, regiments of the nation, distinguished guests. 143 years ago, on this very battlefield, the warriors of King Tetuayo Kampande and the regiments of Her Majesty Queen Victoria engaged in a battle that would echo throughout history. What happened here at Essandrana on the day of the dead moon, on the 22nd of January 1879, marked a turning point in the world's understanding of the Zulu nation. In Ulundi, there's a monument which was erected there where we were vanquished by the British, where the king's regiments were vanquished. And on it, which was not done by Zulu people, but those who were in charge, it's written, this was a turning point not only of the Zululand, but of the whole of Southern Africa. The defeat of the Zulu nation, they say, was a turning point. Suddenly we were seen as savages or enemies, but we're not seen as such. But we are seen as a formidable military force. We became on that battlefield worthy opponents, and a deep respect took root in the hearts of both sides. I'm very proud to stand here today as a descendant of King Tetuayo and the great-grandson of King Tetuayo's Prime Minister Mnyama Mthelezi, who commanded all the king's regiments during the whole operation of the Anglo-Zulu War. And I'm proud that I'm a grandson of Mkandumba Kamnyamane, the son of the Prime Minister, who actually participated in the Battle of Essandrana, and whose brother's bones are here because he died. I'm proud because I know that our nation still stands and that there's still courage within our breasts. I'm proud too because I rise here today to present the regiments of the Zulu nation, and they represent our monarch, our king, and his other subjects. as I've done, as His Royal Highness Prince Sulan has just stated, that I've done that for more than half a century. Every year as we commemorated this Battle of Essandrana, I performed my duty as traditional Prime Minister of the Zulu monarch nation by presenting our King before he addresses his people. This to me is a bitter, sweet moment, for I cannot help but think of the last year when we were not able to gather to this commemoration, as we always do, as the Honorable Speaker has just referred, due to the threat of COVID-19 pandemic. His Majesty, our King then, King Goodwill Zwelithini Zulu, took the difficult but very necessary decision to adhere to all the protocols and to cancel this commemoration in order to protect lives. But little did we know that mere weeks later would stand at the funeral of our King. It is a healing balm to see His Majesty, our King, His Majesty King Mr. Zulu Zwelithini Zulu, kamaphumzana kadini Zulu kacetshwayo kampani esenza khona kaJamu, continuing the tradition upheld by his father of commemorating significant milestones in our nation's history. It is important that we remember and mark these milestones, for they are part of our identity as who we are. They remind us who we are and what we have overcome. They remind us of our strength and the rich inheritance we have from those who have gone before us. It is humbling to know that we are joined by Major Nathan Chronic of the Royal Welsh Regiment, the very regiment that made our forebears here in 1879. On behalf of His Majesty, I want to add a welcome to that of His Royal Highness Prince Tulani, to welcome Major Nathan Chronic and Sergeant Major Terry Williams, and assure them of our highest esteem. The mutual respect that was forged in battle was evolved over time into a genuine friendship. There has never been a trace of grudges being held, and we have always honored one another's bravery. Indeed, I was welcomed myself, Your Majesty, with the greatest hospitality by the Royal Welsh Regiment, under the command of Brigadier Aitken, who invited me to their guest of honor at the St. David's parade in March 2008. And as I walked past row after row of soldiers whose grandfathers had fought on African soil, and when I received their salute, I recognized how far we have come from the pain of the past. It was humbling to know that Her Britannic Majesty, the Queen herself, Queen Elizabeth II, had been their guest of honor a previous year at the same function as the Commander-in-Chief of the Royal Welsh Regiment. I shall never forget being taken to the Regimental Museum in Brecon, where I admired the displays of Zulu assegai and other artifacts. It was moving to see the fine beadwork worn by Zulu warriors displayed alongside the original colors of the 24th foot carried into the Battle of Rocks Drift. I always cherish that visit with deep gratitude. Today, His Majesty the King will speak to us about lessons as the father of the nation, as it is his duty. He will remind us of our capacity to overcome. But this is a message of our people desperately need to hear at a time We are blessed to have the guidance of a king at this time to strengthen and unify our people. To our guests, we as the Zulu people have got a king on the throne. The only thing that has been done is that officially the president is to formally acknowledge that, because the king is actually not voted for. The king is appointed by his father. Right through, it's hereditary. So therefore today we're celebrating, we're saluting our king today, even more than in the past. Because as all of you are aware, this morning in Pietermaritzburg, Prince Mbonisi first took the king to court and took me to court. When I was dreaming that one day that the king was going to be put on the throne. There was a coronation date when there was none. And he should be also the honorable premier of this province. And he failed. And today there was a case starting yesterday where he was disputing that we have a king. Asina inkosi. Mazulu asina inkosi. Asina inkosi. Iphi inkosi. Asina inkosi. Wena wandlovu. Wena wandlovu. That's my message to Prince Mbonisi. Before His Mercy rises to speak, I wish to take a brief moment to express my admiration for a group of artists who came up with a unique way of commemorating the courage of our warriors in 1879. The Mbuso Khoza Institute for Culture and Heritage in Eshowe wrote to me recently requesting my blessing to their initiative. They have arranged a commemorative walk of artists to begin Ondini, where the seat of our nation's king was burnt to the ground by the conquering British Army, and ending here at Essandrana, where our warriors tasted the victory and cried Usud. This walk commemorates the brave warriors who marched from Ondini to Essandrana in January 1879, ready to face anything that threatened our nation's sovereignty and survival. It is wonderful to see young men and women honoring the heroes of our past. It is right that we do so, and right too that we allow their memory to inspire our onward march. Nyazi ukuthi ibutho umnyamana aliphakile uthithizile la eSanjwana ukuthi lalihola uNtshingayo okwakhoza. Ngakho siyabonga kuwe ke Mkhathini ngokwenzileyo. Lokho kuphela bakwethu ke ngiyaqola ukuthi ngenze ngani ukukhuluma ngesilungu, kodwa njengoba sinalaba abazihambeli zesilo, ngibone ukuthi akufanele ukuthi ngakwenzi lokho. Eminyakeni eyi-130 edlule khona kule nkundla yempi amabutho esilo uZulu laduma lapho ngemtholi isibuko sama noma Peter ayibabuke ngasho baya konkosi inkulu umsindo onkilingo ngowani ujini ndomnyama ongapende bezingo ningonyama kayina Yesu Victoria andweni wonke kuzibe namhlanje okwenzeka lapha eSanjwana ngalolu suku la khona kwawampisholo bhuqe emini igidi zibuka mhla ka-22 January kwaba yuphawu oluqopha ukuguquka komlando ngendlela umhlaba jikelele oqonda ngayo isizwe sikaZulu. Ngokuphazima kweso sasingasabukwa njengabantu abanoyi nesihluku noma njengezitha, kepha sasisibukwa njengomhlathi wezempi ohloniphekayo nohlonishwayo, njengoba lezi insizwa zilapha nje zihambele inkosi yethu Ngonyama. Kuleyo mpi saba izimbangi ezinamandla ezasihlasela ziqhamuka kolunye uhlangothi, ngoba nokusihlonipha okujulileyo okwaqubukayo ey'nqabeni zey'nhliziyo zazo zonke inhlangothi. Nginokuyiqhenya hlanga lomhlabathi nabesilo Dinkulu, bobaba abafundisi Mdunge, Ngotsha, bahlonishwa imeya. Nginokuyiqhenya ngokuma lapha kulesi sikhathi njengomzukulu wesilo uCetshwayo kaMpande, kanye nomzukulwane omkhulu kaNdunankulu wasisilo uCetshwayo uMnyamana Buthelezi, owaphaka yonke badidiyela wonke amabutho esilo, owayiphaka impi yenkosi nale ize lapha yayiphakwe nguye, iyayihola uMtshingwayo, isikhukukazi sakithi eMphumayeleni, kade kwasesixozelela ekubhazini. Ngiyayiqhenya ngoba ngiyazi ukuthi isizwe sakithi sisame lapha kusavutha umlilo ukuba nesibindi lapha ey'fulweni zethu. Nginokuyiqhenya futhi njengoba ngisuka namhlanje uzothula isizwe samabandla nabanye abantu abangaphansi kwaso, njengoba sengikwenze njengoba owesilo umntwana osebindini eshilo eminyakeni ngaphezulu kwama-50. Njalo ngonyaka sigubha lo mcimbi okhumbula into yeSanjana. Ngangenza umsebenzi wami ngethula inkosi yami, inkosi yethu Ngonyama khona la. Lo ngumzuzu womunyu obuye uphelekezele ukujabula njengoba ehlile umhlonishi somlomo ngikade ekhuluma lapha, asizanga esikhumbuzweni ngoba isilo sethu ngalesi sikhathi savala imisebenzi, sabhuntshisa ngenxa yokhuvethe. Sasingacabangi ngisho nakancane ukuthi emva kwalokho sesiyoma sesimi edlinzeni lesilo njengobani. Kungamafutha asithoba amanxeba ubona isilo samabandla, isilo sethu esihlezi lapha phambi kwethu. Siyabonga silo umuqhubeka nesiko ebelikhuthalelwe umdlokombane lokugubha isahluko esiyingqopha mnandi emlandweni isizwe sethu. Kuyinto emqoka ukuba siyikhumbule ihlanga lwezwe, siphinde sizigubhe lezi zehlo ezimqoka njengoba ziyingxenye yobuthini ukuthi singobani. Lezi zehlo zisikhumbuza ukuthi singobani nokuthi yini esidlulindele kuyo sanqoba. Lezi gameko zisikhumbuza ngamandla ethu kanye nefagugu lethu eliyivenge elinonileyo esinalo esilishileyo umdlokombane nabanye basendulelayo. Kungilethe intobeko hlangana nomakhosi wenomnyama ukwazi ukuthi sibuthene ndawonye namhlanje no-Major Chronic kwebutho lasendunkulu yamangisi i-Welsh Regiment elatholwa naphezulu ngey'fuba khona la nokhokho bethu nobaba omkhulu lapha ngo-879. Nami ngiyenezelela emazwini owesilo umphathi wohlelo umntwana oseyibindini ngokwamukela egameni lesilo uMajor Nathan Chronic noSergeant Major uTerry Williams, nokubaqiniseka ngohlobo lwenhlonipho ephakeme esimnika yona, ukuhloniphana kwabo nje empini esandwana. Kuguqukile ngekhathi zokuhamba kwesikhathi kwakhiqiza ubungani phakathi ubungani beqiniso phakathi kwethu. Sana futhi sazana ngokuba sinesibindi amangisi asihlonipha nje ngoba ayazi sinesibindi njengawo ngoba nawe enesibindi nembala ngamukela ngokupele munyaka 2008 phesheya ngimenye khona endlu uyalo elamasoja yalempi ngaphambi kwalokho owayemenye kulo mcimbi kwakuuQueen uqobo lwakhe njengoba indlovukazi yamangisi yiyo engumgigeli wombutho waleli ibutho iRoyal Regiment. Angisoze ngakhohlwa amasotsha emilapha engishayela indesheni khona lapho kwakusuka amasotsha ayezolwa nokhokho bethu umzuzu womunye nokuthintika ngibona nezinto ey'bekwe laphana zethu nezenkosi uqobo lwayo esondini ngiyohlala ngilozisa nolo hambo lokuvakasha ngokuthokoza okujulileyo namhlanje-ke isile samabandla sizozwa izwi lalo ngakho ekucabangayo njengoyise wethu sonke isilo siyasikhumbuza ngamanje ethi akwazi ukwedlulela ey'meni inzima ngoba lona ngumlayezo wabantu bakithi abalambela ngamehlo abomvu kuzwa esikhathini naleso imbube ibhonga sibusekile ukuzocosha uholo lwesilo lesikhathi usiqinisa nokusijova ngomoya obunye ukuhlanganisa abantu bakithi kuyihlazo elikhulu ukuthi umntwana ombonisi umntwana sekhwezi lokho ephikelele ngalento yokujivaza nokuthi isilo singacaba ukuthi siyinkosi asiyinkosi bisibiza ngomntwana namuhla akekho phakathi kwethu sibiza ngomntwana silo kodwa yena sibiza ngomntwana kanje lento yabo bayiqhubayo benodadewabo asazi ukuthi iyoze ibhele kanjani kudabisa kakhulu lokhu ubona ingane zenkosi ziqoba umuzi wenkosi umuzi wakwabo njengoba lonke nazi ukuthi izolo kuze bese kuseni namhlanje kade kuyicala emgungundlovu elifaka umntwana umbonisi wase siqophe usuku lombewa wesine ekhuluma into engelona iqiniso umntwana ingekho nje wazaqoba nomhlonishwa uNdunankulu uzikalala esho into engelona iqiniso umntwana wenkosi ngeke ngisho ukuthi
Of course, those are live visuals coming through. Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi addressing the commemoration of the Battle of Essandrana. King Mp Zulu Kazweletini is also expected to address the event later on today. The iconic event in the AmaZulu calendar is being held today in the northern parts of KwaZulu-Natal. Of course, we'll continue to bring you that story as it unfolds throughout the day. Well, just like that, I'm also going to welcome you to the show. Of course, you're watching the Weekend Review with myself, Liesl Wilson. It's the show where we, of course, take a look at some of the top stories making headlines for the week and perhaps what has made South Africans talking. Our first story today, political posturing is already in play ahead of the ANC's December elective conference, where Minister of Tourism Lindiwe Sisulu has openly defied President Cyril Ramaphosa by refuting the presidency's statement that she will withdraw her attack on the judiciary. In back and forth media statements, Sisulu said the presidency's media team was mischievous in saying she had agreed to withdraw her comments, claiming that that was not the case. Osamkele Maseko filed this report.
They were once allies and running mates going towards the ANC's Watershed 2017 ANC conference in Nasrec as president and deputy president. But the camel's back seems to have been broken and reached a point of no return between Lindiwe Sisulu and President Cyril Ramaphosa. Lindiwe Sisulu's comments on the judiciary seem to have irked the president, saying that he had diminished the minister, but the minister coming out and saying that is not the case and the president is simply lying as she did not agree to withdraw her comments on the judiciary.
It is very, very unfortunate that a statement from the presidency has such words. But like I'm explaining to you now, the minister has not apologized. She has absolutely no intention to apologize, and she stands by what she has written.
But the presidency says they stick towards their comments. Minister Sisulu is not also backing down and going forth with her comments on the judiciary and saying she will not withdraw her comments.
How will the president respond to this after in the official capacity of the presidency, it was said he had a meeting with the minister where the minister unreservedly apologized. And then a few hours later, the minister said, no, this is a misrepresentation. So clearly, we are waiting right now, we are waiting to hear from the president what is the next course of action, because clearly, so he will have to act.
She's launching her presidency campaign towards the ANC's 2022 December elective conference, set to begin on the 16th of December, where she is set to challenge President Ramaphosa for the ANC's top job. Samkele Masego, SABC News, Johannesburg.
All staying on the ANC, staff members say they are disgusted at the party's leadership's lack of commitment to resolving problems related to their salaries and employment benefits. The party's employees were on strike last year and are currently staging a stay away due to unpaid salaries and failure of the employer to contribute to medical aid and provident funds. Our spokesperson for the staff, Mvusi Mdala, says that the ANC leadership has employed divide and rule tactics in dealing with their problems.
This stay away currently is going to have a huge impact on the ANC. Currently, as we are preparing for regional conferences, branches of the ANC must convene PGMs and PPGMs. And then they must receive QR codes from the membership system. Currently, none of them is able to do that because of this action of ours. Therefore, what it means that everything in terms of preparing for a conference is in a standstill. And that's a huge impact that is going to have at the ANC, even if the leadership of the ANC at the national level they lack this commitment. They will feel pressure not only from the staff members of the ANC, but from all structures of the ANC, because this has rendered them not to be able to function normally.
King Zulu is also expected to address the commemoration of the Battle of Essandrana. He is currently on the podium. Of course, we understand the iconic event in the AmaZulu calendar is being held today at Ngutu, rather in the northern part of KwaZulu-Natal. Let's take a listen.
Namhlanje ukuthi ngikwazi ukuthi ngithole ithuba ngime phambi kwenu uphathi kwenu namhlanje kuyusuku lwami lokuqala ngingonyama ngihlanganisa umsebenzi kababa isilo esengizalayo ungokuqala ukuthi ngigcobe lapha eSandlwane lapha ethempelini lethu siyisizwe sikaZulu lapho khona umlando omkhulu futhi esizigqaja ngawo lapho kwenzeka khona. Ngithokoza kakhulu ngoba ngibonga ithuba nje ngiyazi ukuthi ingwenyama engizalayo yayikhuluma kakhulu yayineyalo neyibusiso yayiqalekisa futhi lapho kufanele iqalekise khona. ngakho-ke sizwe sikaMageba ngibonga ukwemukeleka kinina ningakhohlwa zimeya ezikhona imeya yaseZululand ningakhohlwa usihlalo wamakhosi inkosi uChiliza namakhosi akhona phakathi kwethu namhlanje ngibonge kakhulu futhi kuyimeya yaseZululand uthula Sizwe esibambisene naye ngibonge kakhulu kuyimeya yalapha eNquthu uShabalala ukuthi akwazi futhi agcine ewenzile lo msebenzi omkhulu kangaka ukuthi njalo ngonyaka lo mcimbi ubuwenzeka ngakho nina besilo ngiyabonga konke lokho ukuthi umcimbi ugcine wenzekile ngoba sike saba nenkinga nemicimbi yasedlukulu la khona besiyibambela thina uhulumeni esemingaphesheya kumfula futhi singeke simsola uhulumeni wakwenzayo ngoba naye uhulumeni waba nokudideka okukhulu ngey'nkulumo nangey'zathu ezenzeka endlukulu kulezi nsuku fana nomkhosi wemihlanga esiwenze eNgwavuma senza umkhosi womhlanga siwenza eNyokeni esigodlweni saseNyokeni kodwa futhi sikwenza lokhu kunzima ngoba kunemithetho yohlelo lwe-COVID-19 okumele ukuthi siyihloniphe imithetho yakhona ngoba ekupheleni kosuku isiza thina nina besilo ngithokoza kakhulu mangibona uZulu emningi kangaka esithe masinbiza nasabela nasondela enkosini yenu nina besilo usuku olufana nalolu lungilethela imizwa eyahlukene ngoba siyazi ukuthi la esikhona namhlanje kwakwenzakalani yini eyayenzeka mhla ka-22 January ngo-1879 la iNgwenyama yalikhipha ibutho lisuka ekhaya esigodlweni ukuthi kuyolwelwa kuvikelwa izwe lokhu nathi namhlanje kuyosiza Zulu ukuthi sibe munye sibambane sivikele izwe sivikele amasiko ethu futhi sizigqaje ngokuzulu bethu nina besilo ngithayisela khona lapho ngandisa ukuthi kube khona ukuzwana ngoba isizwe sikaZulu sihlonishwa umhlaba wonke. Lokhu isilo esingizalayo sasithi masilapha emcimbini ukuthi kungani isilo, ngoba ingonyama engizalayo ibikholwa kakhulu, ithandaza futhi, okusho ukuthi isilo sasikusho lokhu ukuthi lapha eSandrana uNkulunkulu wawela uthini, ngoba kuwumlando esiyigqaja ngawo lokho kwenzeka lapha eSandrana. Nina besilo ngicela ukuba ngibonge esizweni kakhulu kukho konke okwenzakalayo. Ngiyazi ukuthi kuyanilimaza kakhulu ngoba ukhosi nesihlalo iwona msamo wenu. Manje izinto mazithatha kude kanjena nemsamo yenu iyalimala. Nginaso-ke nina besilo isifiso sokuthi sengathi kungasheshe kulunge indaba yesihlalo, ngoba kunedlanzana nje elincane elisiphikisayo lisimise kabi, uma siyangena ey'nkantolo uma ngaluthi hawu thina ingonyama endala siyihlonipha noma engasekho. Ingakho lokhu akushiya ekumisile sizokwenza, sizoqhubeka nakho njengawo amasiko ethu. Ngijabule ukubona ibutho elingaka ninginikeza ithemba nodoloqina ukuthi nikhona eduze kwami, ningaphethi ukuthi ubani uthini, inkosi yenu niyayazi. Ngakho-ke nami sizwe sikaMageba ngizithola ngiyinikela kunina ukuthi konke ubaba ashiya esifundise khona nazo ukuthi imicimbi ngokuhlukahlukana, ngoba bekukhona imicimbi yeinduku, umcimbi wenqina, kanjalo nokweshwama, kanjalo futhi nomkhosi woswela, la sisuke siqinisa khona isihlalo sikaMageba, la sisuke khona sithandaza, sikhulekela izwe, siqinisa nenkosi. Ngakho-ke nina besilo ngiphakamisa ukubambisana siyisizwe siye phambili. Ngiyazi ukuthi kuningi eniyibuza khona, mhlawumbe abanye beyiphendule ukuthi gazi ingonyama linekhona izusaphi. Nina besilo ngiyanethembisa ningalokhu niyibuza kakhulu ukuthi ngizonisa phambili lapho enifuna ukuya khona. Nina besilo ngithokoze kakhulu ngoba imicimbi manginibona nihlangane kanjena Zulu omnyama, imicimbi ngoba siye emcimbini wamagano emva kwalokho engwavuma nina besilo nakhona lapho nginesifiso sokuthi libe khona ibutho njengoba ngibonge kakhulu futhi izinduna zamabutho ukubambisana. Ngiphinde ngibonge, ngiyazi ukuthi ngeke ngakhuluma sikwakhangela. Ngithokoza kakhulu nina besilo isibaya enisakhile ngokubambisana namakhosi namabutho nezinduna. Isibaya esakhiwe kwakhangela saze saphela. Umsebenzi wenu ubambisene kanye nabatwana. Ngithokoza kakhulu ngithi uNkulunkulu akabusise amandla enu kwenzile ukuthi sigcine siphelelele siyasibaya. Ngibe nenhlahla ke nina bakwethu ukuthi ngilithola ithuba ukuthi undunankulu wami naye ulitholile ithuba lokuthi egcine sibonile isibaya, naye wasibusisa. Sinenhlahla ngoba sinedlozi lethu eliphilayo umntwana ukuthi uphakathi kwethu njengoba sikulesi sikhathi. Ngithokoze asifakile isandla kwesibaya. Ngithi akwande ngoba nonyazi lwezulu lwakwazi ukuthi lifike nalo lesibona isibaya sesiphothulekile ukuthi nalo unyazi lwafike lwabusisa nina bakwethu. Sinenhlahla ke nina besilo yokuthi umntwana ufike wasibusisa isibaya, noShembe wasibusisa, okusho ukuthi konke esihlose ngakho laphaya esibayeni kuyakhanya kuzokwenzeka. Nina besilo ngingasandi kakhulu, ngithokoza kakhulu, ngibonge abezokuphepha abakhona phakathi kwethu ukuthi umthetho uyagcineka ngoba silapha. Ngithokoze kakhulu futhi nini nonke ekuyiphatheni kahle, futhi ngithi sengibonga ukubekezela kwenu kukho konke okwenzakalayo, ukuthi ningadideki futhi niyabonakala ukuthi nididekile entweni yenu, ngoba ngisho noma sekungenzekanga lokhu kwesilungu, kodwa ukubekwa kwenkosi ingene esibayeni ngicabanga ukuthi khona okusheshayo okuphuthumayo, ngoba engukhalela kakhulu imisamo yenu, ngoba omkhulu benu nokhokho benu bebehlala namakhosi, manje mabengasekho babheke kunina eniphilayo ukuthi nenaziphi ikhalo akulunge kuqala umsamo wasedlukulu ukuze nemsamo yenu ilunge nabesilo. Sengiphothula, ngithokoza kakhulu Mageba umntana waseyivindini. Ngibonge kakhulu futhi nasebuthweni esisuke nalo Ondini, bazinikela bafika balala bona lapha badela amakhaya abo. Ngiyathokoza kakhulu kulelo butho. Sengiphothula futhi ngithokoza kakhulu nina besilo, ngiphakamise umoya wobuzulu, ngiphakamise izibusiso ukuthi nonke enikhona lapha phakathi kwethu namhlanje ngithi inkosi inibusise, inkosi benani nabadala balapha ekhaya ukuthi umlando owenzeka lapha siyayigqaja ngawo siwuZulu. Mina ngikhona ngizobambisana nani nabesilo. Ngithokoze kakhulu ndunankulu kaZulu, umntwana waphinda ngene sibambisene naye. Kunzima kunjalo, kwesinye isikhathi ngiyake ngimzwela ubuhlungu ukuthi nasengunyameni endala uyena kade egijima nesikhathi sami futhi manje, ngoba isikhathi sami usagijima namanje. Ngakho-ke nina besilo sinenhlahla uNkulunkulu ukuthi usasigcinele yena, ngoba kuyabonakala ukuthi uNkulunkulu unathi, uNkulunkulu usibhekile isizwe sikaZulu, kukhulu futhi akuhlose ngaso lesi sizwe. Ngakho nina besilo ngiphakamisa lokho ukuthi umoya wenu ungaweli phansi, uhambe ngendlela njengesizwe esiyigqajayo. Ngakho-ke ngithokoza kakhulu nina besilo, ngithokoza kakhulu kuNdlunkulu wami esibambisene naye nina besilo. Ngibonge kakhulu uNdlunkulu uGwabini noNdlunkulu uNtombela enqangiphilile. Ngithokoza kakhulu nina besilo, inkosi nibusise.
Wena wanto, wena wanto, bayethe. Awashala ngane nje. Measure chronic, measure making chronic.
Ngithokoza kakhulu Mageba, lapho bese ngingathi kusele ivakashi zethu, ihambeli zethu, uMajor Chronic ukhona phakathi kwethu. Bengifuna ukuthi ngifisa kube khona okuyisipho okuzoba isikhumbuzo salolu suku lwanamhlanje.
AmaZulu King Mp Zulu Kazwelithini addressing the commemoration of the Battle of Essandrana. Just some of the pointers coming out there, including that the King has thanked Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi for supporting both his father, King Goodwill Zwelithini, as well as him during the succession, and also urging the nation, people at large, to pray for him and his family amid the ongoing battles. Again, as we know, the Battle of Essandrana is an iconic event in the AmaZulu calendar. It's currently being held at Ncuku in the northern part of KwaZulu-Natal. Early on, of course, we heard that the king won an important battle, court having dismissed a member of the AmaZulu royal family's interdict to prevent King Mp Zulu Kazwelithini from addressing the commemoration of the Battle of Essandrana. Again, it comes after arguing that King Mp Zulu was not supposed to address any royal events since there was still an ongoing court battle for the kingship at large. Again, Prince Buthelezi has lambasted some royal family members who seem hell-bent on preventing the king from ascending to the throne. That's where we're going to leave it for you now. We'll be back on the other side with more news and updates. You're watching The Weekend Review with myself, Liesl Wilson. Stay tuned.
Did you know?
Right, welcome back. You're watching the Week in Review with myself, Liesl Wilson. More news at this hour now. In breaking news, in fact, a veteran actor, Patrick Shai'S, passed away. Shai'S passed away at his Soweto home this morning. The news of his passing has been confirmed by his family in a brief statement. The family's asked for space to process the painful loss and says that they will release more details in due course. Well, Shai'S best known for his roles in television series Soul City and TV soapy Generations. In other news, Eskom is sticking to its decision to apply for a 20.5% electricity tariff increase that emerged during the National Energy Regulator's final public hearings.
From NERSA to increase tariffs by 20.5%.
It's important for the overall price of electricity to migrate to a cost-reflective level. So Eskom effectively reduced the negative return that was in the original application from 25 billion to 15 billion, and therefore resulting in the overall revenue, allowable revenue, that is being requested to remain the same. And obviously when you express that as a percentage, what the consumer will see as an impact, the 20.5% remains.
Eskom says the 20.5% tariff increase is necessary because it still needs to raise 6.5 billion rand for diesel to power the OCG backup generators. But the Minerals Council of South Africa says this increase will hamper the country's economic recovery.
The reason why the economy is not growing, and the Reserve Bank calculations about the potential growth for our economy is only 0.8.
Johannesburg Mayor Dr. Mpho Phalatse says such a tariff hike would simply be unaffordable for residents and small business owners who are already buckling under the pressure of dwindling incomes and the rising cost of living.
The proposed tariff hike, which is far higher than the current inflation rate, would have a devastating impact on the citizens of Johannesburg, already impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and the economy that is ailing and on a recovery path. The proposed tariff hike would erode business confidence and disrupt economic recovery.
Once the hearings are concluded, the regulator will make its determinations, which will be made known next month. Nothando Makutulela, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Another battle between party loyalty and the oath of office of a member of parliament has reignited a constitutional debate. This is ANC Chief Whip Phemi Majudina has suspended party MP Mervyn Dirks, who wanted President Cyril Ramaphosa to account to Parliament's watchdog body on public accounts, or SCOPA. Well, Dirks said as an MP he was bound by his oath to be obedient to the Constitution and hold the executive to account. Well, Majudina has also stripped Dirks of all powers as an MP and gagged him from speaking to the media on the matter. This comes after Dirks refused Majudina's order to withdraw his letter to SCOPA, asking for the committee to summons Ramaphosa to appear before it to explain his remarks in a leaked recording that taxpayers' money was used in ANC campaigns. But for more on this and other political stories for this Week in Review, we're joined by Professor Barry Hanyane from the Northwest University. Prof, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Lizelle, good afternoon. Good afternoon to your viewers as well.
Prof, let's look at the issue at hand. An ANC MP suspended for wanting SCOPA to call President Ramaphosa to respond to questions regarding a leaked tape where he was heard saying that he's prepared to fall on his sword instead of the public finding out how state monies were used for campaigns. When we hear of such incidences occurring, what picture is this beginning to paint for the ruling party, particularly on the backdrop and with the context leading to elective conference and the inevitable national elections in 2024?
Lizelle, it points to the rising temperature in the room to say, look, this is electioneering year within the ANC, and so knives are out, especially to those who may be punted as, you know, the archangels of the party. The likes of Cyril Ramaphosa, for instance, is he immune from any form of corruption allegations? So such claims are likely to come out to say, can his integrity be challenged for once? No wonder why the spat between him and the Minister of Tourism Madam Sisulu has also started on the one hand, but it doesn't mean that he's not enjoying some measure of support within the party itself. There are those who see him as perhaps the last person to save whatever is left in relation to the integrity of the party. But going forward, I think it speaks to the high degree of contestation within the party, and of course, such would be taken to government corridors, where again the seat of power is located, and of course, this is where the serious political contestation is located as well.
Absolutely, and we see that succession plan also, or contestation plan rather, playing out. And I wonder, looking at the National Assembly and its handling of the matter, I mean, going forward, since Dirks, who raised the matter, has been stripped of his powers as an MP, how is this set to unfold going forward then?
Listen, it will depend on who the main stakeholders are. So that's number one.
Yes.
But number two, do they have the requisite experience to deal with parliamentary scandals? And I'm giving that title to even refer to issues that affect the office of the presidency in this instance. If you go back to your Western democracies, under Nixon, for instance, in the US, the Nixon Gate, how was it handled? Who were the whistleblowers? How did cabinet, for that matter, respond to such? Will, in the end, determine the possible outcomes. And of course, the handling of this sensitive issue, as I said earlier on, at a time when the president's authority and influence within the party and in government is under scrutiny. Let's not forget, however, that the track record of Scopa in terms of dealing with such matters is not as impressive as expected, given the fact that the issue of state influence under the banner of state capture may have weakened accountability in Parliament in the last few years, and in a sense, it may have not recovered. We are also dealing with a party that has managed to change willy-nilly its own chief whips, which in a sense has eroded institutional memory, but most importantly, has taken away some measure of consistency and capacity in dealing with such matters.
Well, staying with the party, Prof, when we look at the current NEC meeting that's also taking place, and perhaps another incident that's made headlines regarding Minister Lindiwe Sisulu and the President, I mean, how is this all set to play out at the NEC meeting going forward? And when we look at the divisions within the party, we also look at the succession plan of the party. Minister Ronald Lamola also coming out to say that he's put his name forward for the position of Deputy President. Things seem to be heating up quite a lot this early in the year.
Lizel, in a less structured way, unfortunately. In the ANC, there seems to be a lack of tradition in terms of managing succession planning. The issue of growing own timber doesn't seem to exist. If you take, for instance, the Women's League, you ask them, do they have a deliberate program to push, firstly, young women who are capable to lead that franchise? You will find yourself wanting in this instance. You then ask the question, who are they putting forward or grooming to at least then contest the highest office in the land as well as in the party itself? Again, the franchise would be found wanting. So these are deficits. These are weaknesses of the party that, unfortunately, they've been allowed to characterize its own makeup, and it will require a lot, basically. Initially, I've been always punting the idea of modernizing the party. It will require that, to put in place structures, systems, processes that would allow the party to grow, but more so grow in a way that says the party is willing to invest in its own members.
Well, speaking of structure, Prof, we've seen scenes of chaos erupting at the Johannesburg Council sitting. And I think it also brings into the fore, the questions of coalitions at large. I wonder, in lieu of what has happened, is this indicative of the nature of coalitions and their inevitable functionality in South Africa, perhaps as we obviously look at it in relation to service delivery as a whole?
And in relation to governance, perhaps, as the umbrella phenomenon and point of reference here, which then begs the question, do we have the requisite experience, once again, to handle such transactions? We don't, unfortunately. Secondly, how immune are these parties away from their own individual ideologies, let alone ideologies of those that lead the individual parties and, of course, the coalition itself? There's bound to be fiction. There's bound to be skirmishes. There's bound to be misunderstandings there and there. And it's early days in terms of this administration. Remember, they have found budgets already approved. What will happen next year between May and June when new IDPs, new budgets are supposed to be approved, and of course the movement of money from one account to the other, which requires the approval of council. Such will then unfortunately bring more fiction, more misunderstanding and disagreements. And we've seen already the ANC and the EFF giving us a glimpse of what to expect going forward in terms of seeking consensus.
Prof, perhaps just in conclusion, as we look at SOEs and their functionality at large, I mean, we've seen Eskom also coming out to state that it will be sticking to its decision to apply for a 20.5% electricity tariff increase. I mean, when we look at the precarious economic situation we find ourselves in as a country, are they justified in this request? And perhaps also, should it be passed or not passed? What are the implications going forward for the average citizen at large?
Well, the public opinion out there is that, unfortunately, it's going to exacerbate the kinds of economic struggles that our people are experiencing. And by people, merely consumers, your investors, your business operators out there, especially your small, medium enterprises that are struggling under the pressure of the COVID economy. All of this put together, I think it somewhat puts pressure on the system at a time when we need to revive our economy, at a time when we're still struggling with issues of unemployment. These are issues that must be looked at holistically, rather than treating the issue of Eskom as something that is isolated. Let's not forget that at least then, last year late, they were able to at least put a bit of profit margins, which should be accepted. But again, it's the operational costs that are eating up the Eskom fiscus. If that part can be managed, the buying of diesel, the issue of relying on coal, the issue of managing supplier database, it doesn't require science. But again, here's a parastatal that has suffered immensely under the disguise of state capture. So much needs to be done there as well.
Well, Prof, always a pleasure having you here. Thank you very much for joining us. Again, Professor Barry Hanyane from the Northwest University, again chatting about the top political stories making headlines for this week. We'll take a quick ad break and continue with more news and updates on the other side. Stay tuned. Welcome back. More news at this hour. The matric class of 2021 has achieved a pass rate of 76.4%. It's a slight improvement of 0.2% from the previous year, where over 800,000 candidates sat for the final matric exams in 2021. However, many questions arise. Questions continue to arise about the quality of education between public and private schools and perhaps the overall education system in South Africa. Perhaps to reflect on the matric results for the cohort of 2021, Managing Director of New Leaders Foundation, Manoj Chiba, joins us for that discussion. Manoj, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us here today.
Good afternoon, Diesel, and thank you for the invite.
Manoj, Manoj, what are your impressions on the matric results that were just released? And in the same breath, how do matric results actually reflect the inequalities of both public and private schools, as well as South Africa's overall education system?
Yeah, I think, look, Liesl, the matric results have been stable. They've been holding, sort of stable over the last 2 years. We've seen a slight increase in the pass rate specifically. But I think, Liesl, what we mustn't forget is that that's the end point of the schooling career of a learner. One of the biggest things that we mustn't forget is that the matric results are just a reflection of the entire schooling life of an individual. So while, we've seen the impact of COVID, which has been huge, I think we must celebrate that the ability for our students and our learners specifically to have got and seen through this period, a period none of us have really seen prior. But the matric results is actually just a reflection of the 12 years in a learner's life. Now, in addressing performance challenges, it doesn't, start only in the last 2 years or so of an individual's life. It really starts much, much earlier, making sure that we've got the interventions that are right to be able to give someone the best chance of success at this critical stage. And I think that's the first part, Liesl. I think we often forget. We like to focus on the event, but what leads up to the event is something that we've got to start thinking about more deeply. You asked the question around inequality, and I think, that's a big question, Liesl. We've got the data, in the public schooling system where we've got just over 90% of the public schools that contribute to our dashboard specifically, over 22,000 schools that, contribute almost on a termly basis. So we've got a big representation of the public schooling system. Now, for me to draw in any parallels to the private school system and talk about the inequality without really seeing the depth of the data would be a little bit unfair. But I do think it's a problem that we have to address, right? And I think that's a broader education problem. Otherwise, society continues becoming more unequal. So we've got to really deeply think about that.
Absolutely. And I wonder if we can go back to the statistics that have been released. I mean, on Thursday, the Basic Education Minister, Anc Mp announced that the pass rate for 2021 cohort was 76.4%. But there have been articles and the DA, amongst others, coming out to question these statistics by assessing and taking the dropout rates into consideration. They're of the view that when you look at the grade 10 enrollment for 2019, it was well over 1 million. But when we look at, the amount of learners that have dropped out of the system did not complete matric, the actual figure is obviously much higher if we consider the students who then also failed the examinations that they sat and wrote. So when we look at the way statistics are reflected and given, and also the overall dropout rates of learners in South Africa, what concerns are also coming forth on that front?
So I think, Liesl, that it's an extremely important point. I think sometimes we wrap up the matric results quite simply in looking at, but we haven't taken into consideration the dropout rate. What the minister is reporting is how many people have written and how many people have passed. And I think that's contextually really important to note from a distinction perspective. But what we've seen is the dropout rate. Now, Liesl, I think, again, as an indicator of something happening in the system, what we've got to be able to understand is how do we leverage some of the data to stop that dropout rate, arrest that dropout rate, and come up with interventions that really start looking at those dropout rates deeply. Now, what we do specifically at New Leaders Foundation, we collect, aggregate, and analyze the data that comes through from our public schooling system, and we play it back to the schooling system from a district curriculum official level as well as the school level. And what this allows one to do is address the problem of what we are talking about right now, Liesl, around dropouts, is we can analyze the data as a critical enabler to be able to say someone like Manoj has got a high propensity to being able to be or is going to be dropping out. What interventions could we be put in place to make sure that we support Manoj in not dropping out? And so what we see, Liesl, is that by focusing on the endpoint, we've got to focus on what leads to dropout. One of the ways to fully understand this entire ecosystem, as I call it, is you and I as individuals are made up of a number of different attributes, different data points that make us up. What we do is be able to take into consideration some of those data points to be able to start predicting that Manoj may drop out. And then what some of those interventions could be is up to the specialists in the curriculum field, right? So what we really push is this notion, specifically, Liesl, around what I call data-driven decision-making. And data-driven decision-making makes it a little bit unambiguous, number one, but more pertinent in making sure that the right interventions are given at the right time to the right learners. And that's needed, to do that. We'll enable it through the data. We've got to drive that action. So going back to your dropout rate, it's what leads to that dropout rate and how might we start arresting it. But to your point around statistics and how they represent it, Liesl, I've got a big bugbear against that. Are we always comparing the same things? How are we slicing and dicing it? And then we must be careful. But at the end of the day, I think we've all got a responsibility to make sure that the learner